I'm on start streaming. Actually, I closed off Safari. Should I have done that? Since I'm not on. No, no, I forgot. I take it we're live at the moment. Hi guys, how you doing? I'm just setting this whole thing up. It's a wonderful thing at the moment, trying to figure out modern technology. We've got all the what is it? Zoom calls. Many of you have probably been on. I have many of them. Hi, I hope you're all doing very well. I see some of you have been following the training. Good. It's been an interesting journey to try and get it to its current form, because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right things, that it's not just a bunch of information, but that you learn piece by piece while you're doing it. It's going to be. I'm not going to be giving you a load of stuff that you'll forget. I'm going to be going back over stuff like you would do in a regular class that will actually work for all things, from sword handling to stretching to yoga to all those different things that you really need, not only just for sword work but just for your life in general. Because I think it's all in one when you're actually looking at quality of life and longevity. Duncan MacLeod lived 400 years. I don't think he did too much sword work, and didn't really worry him whether or not he was working out all the time, but he did. You know what I mean? So, but I think that's kind of part of it. I've noticed that, my mom was 96 years old when she passed, and it was only because she had a muscular disease that stopped her from continuing. But up to the year before, she's everywhere in this local high street, going to get her coffee. She was out every day, walking every day, doing things, and she was mobile. And I think the minute you sit down, the minute you're sedentary, you then become, you start falling apart. And a lot of the things that we're going to be doing in the next month's videos are going to be about how to work mobility. That's for shoulders, for hips, for knees, all those types of mobility exercises that will help you and me, actually, because I'm learning a lot of stuff as well as I go along. A lot of the trainers that I'm working with, Will Thompson, I have Keith Jennings that's going to be working with it, I have Jimmy from my CrossFit area. Those guys will actually be doing articles about food, about nutrition in the lifestyle essentials column, and all those guys are actually working with me to hone this. Mark Makita on the numbering system, which will come later on. This will be a gradual process that we will add to slowly so that you really grasp it, because there's no point in me teaching you in this particular method an entire bunch of choreography when you really don't know how to swing it or do the right footwork, or injure yourself because you're not using the right movements correctly. So I think that's an important aspect for me. So I hope you get to appreciate that this is not a fast one-stop shop. I'm going to learn how to sword fight thing. This is going to be a process. This will take a while to go through, and that's why we released it on Patreon instead of releasing it as a video series, so that I could really delve into all the different aspects of it. Now, we will be changing up a lot of things on Patreon. We've got a lot of great stuff. I've got some amazing ideas coming up in the next 6 months that we will attempt to hone. Everything that we do sometimes is a new process. So even Patreon itself and the training itself took us a good just 2 months, just to 2 to 3 months, just to figure out the Patreon, how to deliver it on Patreon. And prior to that, it was a year of developing it through the academy and through some of the sword experience events that we did. So that's really the process that we've been doing on this. I wanted to. I have a bunch of questions here that you guys have sent me. I'll start with. Let's start with Sue Hassler. Are you there, Sue? Hope you're there. Give me a thumbs up if you are. Sue Hassler asked, how do I get into dancing, and do I still horseback ride? I haven't horseback ridden for a while. Obviously, right now it's a bit difficult to horse ride because you can't really get out. Here in California, we're still on a lockdown, which is driving me crazy, and probably everybody else as well. And the horseback riding is not on the agenda. I don't have the time at the moment. Dancing was something that I got into. I always loved doing it freestyle when I was younger, when I was in my teens. And then when I got to my 20s, I started modeling. I started doing counts of 8 and catwalk stuff, which was all timing and numbering, for those of you that know what counts of 8 are. So when we did that, I then got involved with a dance troupe in Paris, and I started then studying jazz ballet, all those types of things, as well as street styles from some of the guys that I was working with. So it gradually went from there. But movement dance is something that you would learn in RADA, in any acting academy, that would teach you over 4 years. They teach you presentation, movement, script analysis, character analysis, all these different types of things, and I was able to work on each one separately. So, it's been a journey which I think I've been doing separately. Voice, acting, accents, all those types of things I studied separately through different teachers that I was lucky enough to come across over the years, and they gave me the wherewithal to figure out how to work on each of these different skills, because they are skills that you have to work on. I actually remember one time I was in Lithuania shooting Highlander, the Source, and we went into a bar after work. A bunch of us went in. There was a young boy sitting on the seat, and he goes, "Oh, I know who you are." He said, "What's it like being a famous Hollywood movie star?" I said, "Well, it's work." He said, "Oh yeah, right, yeah." I said, he said, "What do you have to do to get into acting?" I said, "Well, it takes a lot of work." He said, "No, it doesn't. You just have to stand in front of the camera and look good, right?" And I'm like, no, it's not quite that. It's like that. It's a bit different than that. So, it's been it is a process. Cassandra Faber asked who was my favorite guest star on Highlander. But to be honest, when you're talking about guest stars, they were many different ones on there that were really cool. We had Roland Gift, I had Roger Daltrey, there's Joan Jett. There were and actors that were not known then, who today are very well known. And so I don't know if I had a favorite. I just was lucky to work with a lot of different ones. Obviously, the ones that were my partners, Elizabeth Grayson, Stan Kirsch, Jim Burns, Peter Wingfield, all of the crew are still my friends today. Some of you may have seen the Highlander Facebook Live that we did, what was it, about 3-4 weeks ago, and we all still connect, except obviously Stan, who tragically took his life earlier this year, and we still can't fathom how that must have been for him, but he'll still remain true to our heart, and he was one of my favorites. He was like a younger brother to me, but the other guest stars, there was some really interesting villains that came on. Peter Horton, who was fabulous. I mean, there's greats, and obviously we had Kronos by Valentine Pelka, who was always a joy to work with. So there's a great amount of people that I was very fortunate to learn from, because I think every time you have something, you learn from people. Even when I do the sword experience, I'm learning from the people that come to visit. I say visit because it is a short 5 hours that we spend together. I learn from what people like, what people move, how people are, what they say, how they do. So you have to look at that, I think, in life to really, move forward and learn for yourself. Roy Murray. Hey Roy, good morning. How you doing? When I look back on the scenes of Highlander or any other scene, were there any ones that left you needing a moment to collect myself? Yeah, there's a couple that have always been kind of tricky. I mean, obviously, emotional scenes are really. I collect myself is an interesting word because we tend to hide our emotions, and collecting ourselves means that we are now saying, okay, I'm shutting the world off to what I'm feeling. And in acting, that's not what you want to do. You want to actually open yourself up to what's going on. And I think the hardest one for me was Jim Burns' death, because he was a friend, and it was like my father, really, in a sense. So it was very reminiscent for me, and so it was a very hard scene. I mean, hard scene to do. It's a hard scene to do, but easy scene to do, because I really didn't have to. What's the word? Dig into technique as much at that point. It was very visceral for me. So that was a very hard scene to shoot, but easy scene to shoot in the mechanics of it. So there are many others, throughout my. I remember when I first started doing emotional scenes. Actually, I think back on the Colbys, when I was doing Colbys, and I was a young actor, and you technically go, well, you need to remember this, your dead cat, or your lover that left you, or whatever it is. The technical way Meisner approach would look at putting a scene together, and I would have that, and I would do it, and I would work on the first take, and then the second take would kind of work, the third take, fourth take, fifth take, sixth take. By the sixth or seventh or sixth take, or if you've gone from the wide shot to the close up, you're starting to shut up. And the more you tried, the worse it got. You weren't able to deliver because the emotion would be in there, but you couldn't let it out. And I learned a very interesting technique, and that was once you got into that, was to go off the set or go to the corner and start jumping up and down, doing some physical work to get the physical, the emotional or mental emotion out of your body and make the physical release you. Because what would happen when I didn't do that, when I was an actor starting out, I would do the scene, and I knew I didn't get to where I wanted to get to, and I'd walk away after the scene, and all the emotions would come out, because I was now free from the mental block that would happen in an emotional scene. So it's a technique that you have to constantly work on. That I think is something you learn as you go along, and all these little tidbits. Somebody gives you that little gem and says, "Try this," and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that works so well." So I think that was the emotional part of it was actually really useful for me to learn. The Claudia Melham, hello from Germany. How are you, Claudia? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're listening to this. But you say, how do I prepare to slip into a character playing a bad guy, for example? Where do you get the right feeling for this role? Okay, so any actor that does a role prepares for a scene in different ways. I do a lot of research. My acting coach would always say to me, a great actor is a great detective. And it is very true, because I would, for instance, when I was playing, I did a small film called Seance. And I played the ghost, this evil ghost who was like a pedophile, basically. And so I was doing research on child killers, pedophiles, all these types of very strange people, to try and get into their head as to what they were like and how that was. And any bad person doesn't see themselves as bad. It's just their outlook on life is very different than somebody that wouldn't do that. For instance, a cat. Some people would look at a cat, and stroke the cat. Some people would think two minutes about squirting the cat with water or kicking it. So it's a different point of view, but they would pick the cat up and stroke it, then grab it by the hair and shake it to see whether or not it was that would do anything to it. Different people's mentalities do something, but they don't see that as being wrong. Hitler didn't see himself as being wrong. right? So I think a lot of the time you have to find the human portion of it and look at the things. I mean, when I was doing research for seance, I was um, sitting in my house at the time, and I had a 3-level house, and it was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So I do research for at night. It's really good. I can get my head around things, and I'd be sitting there researching things, and I'm looking at some grisly images and stuff of of these serial killers, and suddenly I hear this noise outside, and so you kind of look and you're like, what was that? Because your mind is now racing with all this imagery and all this stuff. So it's to get into somebody's mind like that, you have to then say, okay, and from that point, okay, so this is the I've got a squirrel here actually just come on. Hello, squirrel, how are you doing? To get into that person's mind is one thing, but then the next thing is to now, what does that person want in a scene? So, for instance, if I'm playing a scene with, let's say, a guy that I meet on the street, right, for instance, as a serial killer, I've got one thing in my mind of what I want from that guy. As a regular person, I might just want to ask him directions. The serial killer might want to ask him directions because he wants to see whether he's susceptible or not, whether or not he's which way he's going to walk home. So there's different ways that you look at it. So therefore, your intention on why you're asking that question is very different, and that's how you get into playing a bad guy, because a bad guy, is not necessarily a bad guy. Um, it's funny because I can hear everybody's kind of cooped up now, and what I've heard more lately is all these. It's like the road races. Everybody's out because the freeways are relatively clear. They've gotten much busier over the past week, but you've got all these guys with fast cars and they're doing donuts in parking lots and stuff like that. So it's kind of, I just heard some of them zoom past right outside now. So it's kind of weird. But anyway, off subject. So, and so the feeling I get from playing these roles, I think, is just based on who the person is. You've got to then get rid of it afterwards because you're trying to live in that person's head, in that person's body. I think you've got to be very careful as to getting rid of that. My wife used to say to me when she first met me, you come home and you're playing the character. And I'd be like, oh yeah, so I am. But it does get into you sometimes. Carol Morganroth. Good morning, good afternoon. Where are you? Don't know. Where are you? Carol, are you on this call? Because I'm now addressing my comments to you. You asked what Boken should you purchase because you're a beginner and you destroy things intentionally. Don't worry, I destroy things unintentionally as well. And you've got some arthritis in your hands. I think anything that has a softer grip. We have new Bokens that we're going to be releasing, a new grip that we've got coming out. We've got a whole bunch of new stuff as well that I've kind of held off for a little bit, but the smoother grip, our gold Boken grips, for instance, which are pre-made handle grips, are very soft. The one we have, which is the new Sword Experience handle, which has not been released yet, but that will be soon, is a simple grip. And as a beginner, I would suggest you get something that is not expensive, especially if you're going to plan on smashing it around the house and smashing anything with it. We've tried to keep our Bokens relatively inexpensive. They are all handmade. They are all made for your length, so they are quality designs. And we've also looked at all our Bokens this year, and we're bringing a lot of the prices down. We're adding some really new cool woods and some new cool finishes to our Bokens, but they're all now going to be actually less expensive than they were when we first came out, because we've been able to really hone the technique of delivering the quality program, and so therefore there will be more choices with less of a price range. So they're actually all going to be coming out probably within the next month or so, a month or two. But as a Boken, I mean, it's something that should be relatively easy for you to move. If you've got arthritis in your hand, there are different things. You should be definitely looking at our Lifestyle Essentials bulletin, because there's a lot of things that we're talking about right now, for instance, about what can stop inflammation in the joints. I have arthritis in on my thumb. They told me it's painful. It's been like that for years, though. It's just in the joint. but I take different vitamins and supplements for it, and it tends to not flare up as much, and takes the inflammation out. One of the things that have just recently come, and I'll probably be mentioning this in the training videos, just recently, actually, it was on Seth Rogen's podcast, but I'd already talked to Will Thompson, who does the current Lifestyle Essentials column, about D3. D3 has been not only is it really good for immune system, it's now also looked at as being a good combat to the coronavirus. So, and apparently they had that same commentary on Seth Rogen's show 2 days ago, talking exactly about that. Doctor came on and talked exactly about D3, not D2. You've got to get D3. It's not just vitamin D. Look at D3, and to take that every day, and that takes away a lot of different. It gives you your immune system, and it brings up your immunity to viruses. So it's a great thing to be taking, whether you're young or whether you're old. It's a great supplement to be taking. So remember that. Okay, let's have another one. Carol Morganroth. Okay, thank you. I look amazing. Thank you. I'll take that into consideration. Do I have a painting of Dorian Gay somewhere? What is my personal workout and food regime like? Well, in the lockdown, it's been a little less rigid, should you say? I mean, I am a vegan. The reason I'm a vegan is because, about 6 years ago, I realized as I was getting older, things would be slowing down for me and things wouldn't work as much. So I just so happened to look at a program. Cowspiracy was one of them, and Food Inc. I think was the other. And it talked about what the effects of meats did to the system, and how it slowed things down, and how it didn't mean I was not going to eat meat ever again. What it meant was that at this particular time, what I wanted to do was to be able to clean out my system, because when you think about it, if you really think about the way we live, if you think of it as being a vessel, when you pour something into a vessel, and you pour the water out or the liquid out, and you pour some more in, and you pour it out. But you do that over time. You start seeing a film that's attached to the side of anything. That's the natural way of things. So you need to be able to wash that out somewhere. So your internal system is exactly the same. Whether you're going to be doing enemas or anything of that nature is one different way of doing it. But really, to get the colon clean was to eat a lot of vegetables, which actually get rid of a lot of the cholesterol in your system, and therefore put your blood pressure to the right pressure that you really need, as well as stopping a lot of things such as cancer, heart disease, etc. And when I first started it, it was really hard to do because, back, we're talking 6-7 years ago, it was not as, not as apparent as it is today. A lot of places, it's still a new thing, really, relatively. But now in California, you have everywhere, every restaurant, everywhere has a vegan option. And as I found, it wasn't as hard to do because there were things that I was naturally eating that I could say, I can substitute it for that. Problem was that, when you actually say, okay, I'll have that muffin. That's vegan, right? That muffin's vegan. That pizza cake's vegan. That ice cream's vegan. Yeah, but all the sugar in it is not, and it's not good for you. And when I went back to training about 2-3 years ago, and I decided to really start, concentrating on my training, and I looked at the sugars in things, and even in milk or cereals or anything of that nature, had an immense amount of sugar in it, and we don't realize there's sugar in so many different things that we eat. So I started cutting out things like breads and sugars of that nature. And if you want, oh, by the way, if you want to refresh your video, you can join the live chat. So that's what you want to do right now, is refresh your video. I was just giving a notice here off screen that refresh your videos, and you can get to your live chats. That'll enable them for us, so we can actually get some of your other questions in there. So as I was saying, the vegan lifestyle was something that I kind of chose, and I realized that I still eat fish, so because I wanted to get some protein. I actually like fish, and there's a couple of things I can't get off of. I was off dairy. I don't eat dairy. I didn't eat eggs for 2-3 years. I've started eating eggs this past year, once a week maybe, an omelette here and there. And there's certain things you cannot get away from. But I think, like anything, I think you have to drink a lot of water. Water's the main thing that I drink a lot of, as well as vitamins. I think we don't realize we get foods these days that come from the grocery store and they are looking big and juicy and all that stuff, but you don't really know the fields that have been recultivated. And some of the vitamins that we used to have in foods, we've been a fast food culture now for many years, that a lot of the vitamins we used to have from natural foods are not there anymore. And so I think taking supplements is a very important thing that gets rid of inflammation that I talked about before, as well as it actually helps you maintain healthy bones, gets you sluggish, or rid of sluggishness. There's a lot of things that people say, oh, but I couldn't give up meat. And listen, sometimes, depending on your blood type, you can be a person who may need meat in their diet. So I'm not saying don't eat it, but it's just for me personally, it seems to have worked very well. I mean, I'm not as tired. I mean, I possibly get 6 hours sleep a night, especially now, because with a new baby thing. 6-7 hours. I got 7 hours last night, which was a blessing. But the key thing is really to get the sugars out of your system. And the other thing is you've got to realize something else. I mean, is that as we get older, and it doesn't matter whether you're 30 years old, 20 years old, or 4 years old, as you're getting older, things that you are ingesting into your system, whether it's from the air, whether it's from the foods, they will have an adverse effect to you at some point. So you need to be able to cleanse out your system somehow. So think of that, because some people have cancer in the system. I'll tell you a story about Will Thompson, who does our lifestyle essentials, and he's very open about it. It's not something he wouldn't talk about. So I'm not saying anything amiss here in this thing here. His family was prone to cancer. His father had cancer. His uncle had cancer, died of cancer. And so he was constantly going to the doctor saying, listen, can you do cancer screening on me? And so he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're too young, you're 40 years old, you're fine, in a couple of years we'll do more tests. Keep going back, and then finally went back and they did another test. And usually for the cancer screening, usually in our bodies, I don't know what the level is, what the name of the level is, but you're supposed to have like 4 or 5 I think 4 is the max that you should have in your system for your body, so that way, hold on a second, I'm going to click a link into my iMessage here, just to see, I can see some of your messages as well coming through here. Here we go, I'm going to watch some of your messages, I can actually answer them live as well. But he had, God, that's so bizarre, I can see myself now, this is really interesting. Where are those comments? Where are those? Oh, there they are. I can see them. Okay, fine. Okay, hi. So anyway, basically he went to the doctor, and the doctor then said, your cancer, oh my gosh, they're at 4,000 something, and they were supposed to be at 4. And they said, oh my God, we've got to get you on this diet, and we've got to get you, So he went on this diet, went on these things that they told him to do, and the next time he went back, it was at 6,000. He should have been dead, basically. And so what he did was he changed his diet totally to a vegan diet, took out all the meats in the system, but he also took out something which was lysine, which I believe was something that was a nutrient that he was taking for many years. That they'd said, oh, lysine's great for your recovery or whatever it was for, and it's also good for anti-cancer. Well, just prior to him going off it, he looked at the research, and some research had come out and said, well, it actually can cause cancer. So he stopped that immediately, and what he did was he ate a lot of avocados was one thing, and after doing all of this thing, he then became cancer-free. And Johns Hopkins University are now studying him because they're like, this is impossible. You can't be like that. So out of 100 people in the world that they're studying, he's one of them, because they want to know how he was able to beat cancer. And he truly believes that getting off of the meats and all off of that stuff was able to help him. So different people have different ways of doing it. My way is, does it mean I'll have an ice cream sometimes? Oh yeah, Does it mean But I think everything in moderation. I think we don't realize every day that we're constantly having a beer, or we're constantly having a muffin, or and eventually that thing, as I said earlier on, builds up, and we've got to stop the build up. So that's kind of what I going to do. Now somebody else also talked about my tat here. He said, "What is my tat?" Well, my tat happens to be this is my family crest here, and this is my daughter, my wife, my son, my daughter, or my daughter, my son, my wife, depending on how you look at it. Now I've got another son. I've got to add an S to it for seven or Sevi. But that's them. So, and then this is my English heritage, the cross sign here, and this rest of this is a shield that protects them with honor, integrity, and devotion. So there was a meaning behind this tat for me, and it's been something that I would never get a tat that didn't have a meaning. I may get another one. I don't know yet, but I do have to add to this. My wife was saying to me, exactly where are you going to add to it now? I'm not exactly sure where you're going to add to it. I'm like, okay. It's okay. I'm going to ask Ari Rubin. Ari asked about the training device. Okay, so the training device I'm going to be bringing out will be coming out, and it is literally, actually, can you, David? I'm going to show you the training device. I'm going to ask David. David, can you go down into my garage, and above where all my swords and that are, one of the training devices are in there. I'm going to show you the training device. It is a it's a patented device that we will have that you will be able to use weights on it if you needed to, but in reality I don't think you will need to, because it is actually heavy or heavier than a bokken, and depending on where your handle you're holding it, it gives you a heavier weight to actually use. So I think there's there is a, if you're holding a handle this way, the fulcrum, if you're holding it lower here, which we have here, the strap, etc., the way you use it, it actually puts more stress on your system. But again, you don't have to put much weight on it. Those people that do want to have a full workout can actually put 2 pounds on it, and that would be plenty. If you put 5 pounds on this, you'd be barely able to use it. So David is bringing me the device. This is what it looks like. It is a sword that has, you can actually take the weights, you can put it on here. It has a safety clip on the back here. It has a safety strap here that you would be holding in this angle like this. This actually has a lot of weight on it, believe it or not. You can hold it here for the depending. There will be this is just a prototype that we have here. It is a stripe on either side, so that when you actually move the stripe around, you can actually tell the position that you have your hand in. So if I was pushing it position like this, and I see this stripe here, I know that I'm in the wrong position. So that you can literally turn it over and make sure that when you look at your hand, you know whether you're pronated or supinated, depending on it. It looks small, but let me tell you, holding it from here is actually a lot of work, even just doing this here. The minute you start putting 2 pounds on this, 3 pounds on this, you will have a very heavy workout. That's a basic device. We have a couple of different handles that will be coming out for this. But as I said, this was just a prototype, so that you'd be able to get something to start with. Most of the time I'd say go outside if you can train outside. That would be a better way to do it, because you're out in the open. Obviously, the training we have is there for that month, and as long as you're constantly doing it, I give you 3 days to really work on the things that we've worked on. but it doesn't mean I won't be repeating them, because I think you need to be repeating to be reminded of certain things or to show different aspects of it. So I'm going to move on to another comment, another one of the questions that came in. Do I prefer one-handed style or the two-handed style of katana or the longsword? I do. I really enjoyed the bucket hilt, the Scottish claymore. The claymore's a bit different, but I mean the bucket hilt that we use. I really do like the single sword, but I also do like single-handed double swords, pretty much in a sense like a screamer. But we had a style in Chinese style which is called butterfly knives, which are about the length of the training tool, a little bit longer, but they're fatter like this. That has two hands, because I always kind of find that sometimes with one hand you can be prone to losing it. So a lot of the time people have their hands here, and this is the wrong position to have it. You have to have it out here or behind you here, because you don't want to be in this space anywhere when you're fighting, because if you miss a block, your hand can get hit in the meantime. So I'd be very wary of a single hand, making sure you do have it in one spot. Having two hands naturally puts you in that position, but most people, what they tend to do is they then tend to utilize the right hand when they're doing the movement, rather than the left hand making the movement. If you think of a fulcrum, and I'll show you this here on this thing here. If I'm moving this is what's moving it here. See this left hand here? This is what's moving it. So as you're moving it, that's what moves the hand. It's not the hand doing it itself. Because the tendency there is to make this look happen, so you're actually pushing things rather than swinging things, which is what this does. And that's what things we're going to be working a lot on, is making that smoothness. Because when you do that smoothness, you can then change it from a very quick movement like this or a very large one like that, because of this quickness in the wrists. That's why we're going to be focusing a lot on wrists and joints and of that nature, because you need to have those moving and strong, so that you can keep up with it. That was from Jason Smith, by the way. Jason, good morning. If you're on here, I'm not sure if you're still around, but yes, Jason, that was for you. I think Susan Icor. One question you always want to ask was it like to fight with Christophe Lambert? Plus, what's the difference in the fighting scenes in the show and the movies with those fights? The Christophe and I, I first saw Highlander in movie theaters or on film, on TV. I can't remember which, and I loved it. Christopher Lambert was the Highlander, so I started fighting him. It was a little intimidating in a sense, but we got on immediately because he has a very similar spirit to I do, and I think that was kind of the thing that is about the Duncan and Connor. They had that joie vivre, but a very serious side to them as well. So the fights we had in the beginning obviously were choreographed by Bob Anderson, and we really sort of had a great time in the first scene that we did when we did it in the gathering, and that was a real fun fight to do. And in reality, the technique was kind of there, kind of not. But as I started really getting into sword fighting and martial arts for the next 5 or 6 years, I really learned a lot about stances and movement and positioning. And so by the time we ended up doing the film, which was, oh gosh, another probably 10 years later, I had continued to practice and work on things, and I was very fortunate to work with a lot of different people. And so by the time I got to Chris again, who had not continued doing it, I seemed to have a better grasp at things than he did, which was kind of odd, because when we were filming Endgame, Chris was coming to me asking me whether the sword styles were fine or not. I was like, yeah, of course it was, Chris. Yeah, it looked great. No, but I think because what we wanted to do was really kind of specify the two different styles between Duncan and Connor, because there's the two guys are using a katana, but your katana can be used in different ways, and the stances and that can be slightly different. So I used a slightly different stance than he did, and so we were always looking at what was his footwork doing, what was his upper body doing, what did it look like, So if you look at the fight on the roof, when we faced off against each other, I had an upward parry this way, and he had the standard katana parry in the right shoulder block. So it was it was a different thing. Now, Michael Kuprian says my motion is moving is mostly from the wrist rather than the forearm. Well, they're both move together. You're not moving the entire arm, and I watch a lot of people do that. When they're moving swords, people tend to do this. They tend to do this with their hand, and by doing that, you're using your shoulder and not letting the boken move. You've got the wrist starts the motion, then the forearm takes over, and then the arm gets involved. It's an entire motion. If you look at this motion, when you start this, here comes the wrist, there goes into the forearm here, and then the arm takes over. So it's one to the next. The wrist has to start it, but then it goes into the whole motion. So I think it's oh, okay, Sean Dempsey. Hello, Sean. Sorry, I'll just finish Michael Kuprian's word. So hopefully, Michael, that helps, because I think that does it. And also make sure that when you're doing all of this and you're going up this way here, be careful with this flexibility. We're going to be talking a lot about flexibility and exercises for the joints, for the hips, for the knees. All this will help all of this. Most of the knee problems, and I just saw Sean Dempsey's thing here. He said he tore his meniscus in his left knee and it still bothers him. And the horse stance helped flexibility in the knee, and it's a suggestion for improving knee strength. Yes, we'll be getting right to that in the next month's stuff. I'll be going through a whole series of hip flexor and psoas muscle, all the hip flexor exercises that will not only help your hip mobility but also help your knees, because a lot of the time, a lot of the problems from the knees or any other of the stability of the joints comes from the hips. The hips basically show the entire movement of the body. They really focus on most things. I mean, you think about it, you can't move your torso if you've got tight hips, and you can't move your bottom area if your hips are tight. So that goes from from all the things, from the psoas muscle to the IT band to all the hip flexors, all those types of things. We'll be working on those, and that will help you not only in sword work, but in things like walking and kicking and jumping. I know we're all jumping these days, right? And doing things of that nature. So I think we have to look at those things to keep them for mobility. And I think if you have any problems in joints, I saw that Claudio Mellam just said you have a damage for a thumb joint. A thumb joint is damaged for a thumb joint. Most of the time you're going to have any supplements have to do that. A lot of the time when you have thumb joints, again, in here, this area here, this portion, you're squeezing this together, you have bones that run through this area of the hand here like this, and squeezing this together here actually resets some of the joints in the hand itself. So doing this actually gives you some mobility in the hand, but I would talk about supplements and stretching. If you have anything there, anything that's stretching has to actually help, because whenever you have damage anywhere, it creates cartilage, and when cartilage rubs on joint, that's when you're going to get a lot of pain. So you want to actually don't have too much of a build-up on that. So you want to give that joint a bit of a movement, right? So okay, so Ari Rubin, you've had shoulder surgery. Good. Ari, yes, that's one of the things. And also, even if you've had shoulder surgery, stretching. I can't stress this enough. And I know someone's like, oh, stretching. But your mobility will be extremely improved when you stretch. I spoke to, again, I wanted to keep mentioning, we've got 3 different people right now that are going to be working on the lifestyle essentials thing, 3 different points of view. Will Thompson is a certified, he's not only a fitness coach and a nutrition specialist, but he's also part of the Olympic weightlifting team. He has a certification to teach weightlifting, and when he went in to do the weights, he's actually had back surgery twice, and he said to me that his flexibility was greater than some of the younger competitors there because they didn't stretch. He could lift better weights than they could because they didn't stretch. So therefore, you're not accessing the muscles because your muscles are tight. So if your hip flexors are tight, if your any of the psoas muscle, your backs, any of that stuff is tight, you cannot move. Therefore, you cannot have the correct range of motion, and you can't work correctly. So I think, Jason Smith is waiting for the 1 minute 30-second horse stance. Good on you, Jason. It's coming. Yes, sorry, Rita. I just saw that note on here. It's 1 minute 30 seconds. Yeah, we can do 1 minute 30 seconds. I'll bring that up perhaps the next time. But keep working on them because they will give you stability. It does work on that. Make sure you don't, when you do a horse stance, if you're going from there going down, don't go below 90 because the minute you go below 90, you're going to put more stress on the hip, and you won't engage the quads as much. You stay slightly above 90 in that respect. And as well, the knee, if this is the knee, make sure it doesn't go over your toe. So when you're sitting in a horse stance, if this is the flat of your foot, try lifting your toes up off the foot so that the weight is sitting kind of in the middle toward the back, and that way you'll realize you're not putting pressure on the front of your foot and therefore putting pressure also on your knee. So just watch that because I've actually looked at that. Do that. Priscilla Manriquez, hello Priscilla, one of the longest serving Sword Experience members. How are you today? You've just had sciatic nerve pain. I've had that before. The stretches I'm going to be bringing you are going to help that. I had sciatica when I was 16, 17 years old, and one of the stretches was one of the ones that really helped a lot was the cross leg, laying down on the flat, bringing one knee up, a bent knee, and then crossing that leg over, which stretches the back here. But all the hip stuff that we're going to be doing will open your hips up and allow, because what sciatica is, it's the nerve that runs down the back of the hip and gets trapped in the hip, and so therefore you really need to release that, and it will help that that nerve from touching and stop the pain. Because I know it's horrible. Listen, I had it when I was younger. I've not really had it since. I've had other pains, lots of them. Trust me, I've had lots of pains. But in reality, you've got to get rid of it. You've got to open up all those joints. And if you think about this, these are our joints, right? Here's your knee joint. We've got all this pressure pushing down all the time, pushing down, and all the muscles and the ligaments against it. As we're young, they're all nice and loose. It's like when you fall over, right? You're falling on the ground. You bounce back up again when you're younger. When you're our age, you kind of get up and you're like, oh, I'll sit here for a minute. And then I'll get up. Because the joints are not as flexible. All that pressure, we need to release that pressure from the stretching so that all these joints are not working so hard against each other. So there's also that. Now, Payam Golistani, hello Payam, how are you doing? Am I going to open an academy somewhere? Well, the academy, we're opening up, obviously, the classes we do. It's harder to do working out in different places, but my goal is to be able to bring people to a level that they feel comfortable being able to do sword experiences with, and from that point start teaching different instructors to start opening up different places where you can start studying. So I think the key here is really to start working online. I know that sucks sometimes because it's better in person for me. Sometimes it's better in person. I know some of you feel the same. So the important thing is to get to do what you can now, and then when you have the opportunity to go and spend time either with myself or one of our instructors that can really sort of do some pointers to you. But that said, we've got some really interesting things coming up in the next 6 months that I'm not going to tell you about right now because again, we're in planning stages of how to develop that. And if I tell you now, you'll be like, well, when's it coming? When's it going to be there? And I'm going to say, I don't know. And then you'll be like, oh, Adrian, but you told me it was going to come. Anyway, someone, Ari said, you notice that the position of my arm is relative to my body in my stance is very similar to the bridge position in Jeet Kune Do, Wing Chun, Kung Fu stance. Yeah, obviously my background is in Kung Fu. It does have that. And somebody actually asked me just recently, actually one of the questions that was asked, and I'm going to actually answer this probably in one of the sword experience, was what was my foot position like? Obviously, for me, when you're dealing with foot positions, some people move differently. Everybody moves differently. That's why when people ask me who should I train with, what style should I train, I say to you, what style do you feel more comfortable with? What are you getting from that teacher? Do you understand that teacher? Do you know what they're telling you? Because if you don't, then you're not gonna get it as quick. And every teacher is going to give you something different. So it's the same thing with styles. When you take a style, your of movement might be more suited to one style than another. Your footwork might be more suited to the fencing stance rather than the Kung Fu stance, which is more on the heels rather than on the middle to the front of the toe. So it's really different about that. So I think the styles is very. I am so having done this for 35 years now or more actually. I've realised that everybody moves differently. Everybody has a different way of doing it, but the result is just the same. If I'm trying to break somebody's arm, this elbow is only going to move in this direction. Whether I break it in a karate stance or in a kung fu break, I'm still breaking the arm. It's just a different technique that applies to it. So, Larry Schwartz, do I still practice the Qigong breathing forms that I did during Highlander? No, I have done some. But we are going to be focusing on breathing. I have also been doing a different breathing series of exercises to help the mind, to help actually the healing of the body, because with the right type of oxygen in the body, and we will be utilizing that in the training as well at some point. But as I said, we're going to be moving one thing at a time. We will be moving forward on those things gradually. But I will be bringing all that stuff. But as I said, it's not going to be, I'll give you all of it at once. I'm going to make sure that you will work on something, and then we'll work on it again, and then we'll work on it in a different way, so that there's different ways you'll get it. And bring me your questions. Make sure you bring me your questions, and because I will answer them in the next 2 videos. I'm going to be answering some of your sword-related questions that you asked specifically in the training, so that I can show you. It'll probably be easier when I'm in front of you with the sword, to show you what the answer to some of your questions are, so I can do that. The academy that in Central Florida, Michael Cuprioni asked whether to take whether I'm going to bring an academy down to Central Florida. I was going to be bringing, I am going to be bringing the sword experience down to Lakeland. Unfortunately, obviously, due to the current crisis, we've had to postpone that. I am still going to be bringing it down there. It just depends. I mean, the place we had was so amazing. The location was stunning. And I would rather, in a sense, wait until they give me the green light, possibly September, to come back and do that. I mean, we're trying August, but we're not quite certain yet on that. It's going to be a process of trying to figure out how and when to do certain things, because every day things are kind of changing. I did hear yesterday that the CDC actually just recently released the notice saying actually we were overzealous on talking about washing down your groceries. It doesn't look like the virus actually attaches itself to any packets of stuff, so you don't have to wash down your groceries now. Okay, so there's that thing. I did see a documentary that explained where this virus came from. If you want to type a look at this, I think it's a very eye-catching documentary. Basically highlights where it was created, because it's not man-made. It's not natural. It's a man-made device. So this was actually done by a guy that talked about. I actually can find it now on my computer. I may share. I have a reticence of sharing certain things sometimes, purely and simply because when I do, and I just share something that happens to be, information, people then go, oh, you're doing this and you're spreading this. I'm like, I'm not spreading, I'm just basically showing you what the information is here. So, that's really the thing. It's basically by the Epoch Times, did a documentary on where it came from. They studied, where it came from, the people who, the scientists and CIA representatives who talk about the reason why, and etc. etc. Very interesting. It's actually had 2 million views so far, it's Crossroads. If you want to look it up, it's the Epoch Times, and it just says the first documentary movie on the origin of the CCP virus. So if you want to check that out, I think that's an interesting way to look at it from that point. Where am I now? I've lost my live streaming. Where am I? I've lost my. Hold on a second. There I am. Okay, I've just lost it. Okay. We are. Somebody's actually asked me, am I going to be, after lockdown, will I be offering online training? Yes. The online training is going to continue. I've always wanted to do online training because I think it's important. I think it will be good for people to try when they to do prior to going to a sword experience, because you'll get a lot more out of the sword experience if you've already got basics undermined. So online training will be offered. The Patreon stuff, as I said, we have a lot of different things, and it will develop into different aspects. It's going to move from one thing to the next. It's the link to. Sue House has just mentioned. Can I share the link to the documentary? Yes, I'll send that out. I'll put that out on my Facebook page at some point. And now I have a bunch of people outside about to drink on what is it, like 11 o'clock in the morning? This is good. It's 11 o'clock in the morning here, and everybody's making a lot of noise. Someone says, am I planning to come in Portland, Oregon? Portland has not been on our list lately. It has been, we actually go to places that people actually, the more people that ask us to go to different places, the better it is. The more we share different things. That's why our Musketeers, we have a whole new team coming that you may have noticed that our posts are going to get slightly different. What we're offering, we have a newsletter coming out, we have a blog coming out, we have the Patreon stuff coming out. We've got a lot of online stuff that is not just the training, as I said. It's going to be about breathing, it's going to be about movement, it's going to be about joints, it's going to be a lot of things, and moving it again. And then I've got some other stuff. I keep teasing you, but that's all right. Sue House says I'm a tease, but that's okay. Any other? Darlene Smith says to me, for so many years on the show and now with the sword experience, you've worked in close proximity with novice sword users. Were you ever hurt by any of your inexperienced guests on Highlander or by one of your students? We don't have that long of left on this Facebook to mention how many. I'm joking. But yes, I've been, and by experience as well, because on the show, a lot of the time what ends up happening is when you have somebody going into a sword action, they tend to have the adrenaline takes over and they forget all the choreography that's been studied. So you then tend to over swing or not be as precise. That's why I'm so precise in the sword experience about targeting, because it really helps you not only as a choreographer but also as a martial artist, because if you know your target and you know what you're going for and what you're going to manipulate the person doing, you're going to be much more successful in doing that, or even in competition. So a lot of the time, yes, and as I said, as I do the sword experience, I've learned more things as we've gone along, because I've seen things people do that I didn't expect them to do. I remember one time, and I can't remember what sword experience it was, there was an overhead swing with a turn in it. Now, obviously, sometimes the turns are more for movies than for reality, unless you're utilizing it for that speed of motion and strength to come back and strike somebody, which is a lot in the Chinese styles that we use. But so there was a motion, and the sword, a lot of the time, and this is one thing I'm going to be talking about a lot, when you have the sword, so people tend to not bring the hands up first, they bring the tip up first. So the tip moves. If I'm going into this position, people will do this instead of doing this. So what happened was, as the turn happened and as I passed somebody, the tip hit me in the back of the head, and I was like, "Oh gosh, yes, of course." I've just realised. So that move, I've got to be careful of that move when I'm actually moving through that motion. And I hadn't even thought about it before, because for me, the natural way was to bring the hands up first, not bring the tip up first. The tip is useful in fights, because if you're doing that, then you're hitting the person behind you. But if you're trying to keep your partner safe, that's not exactly what you want to be doing. So I think you... Michael Kuprion, you're talking about F. Braun McCash as a walking weapons encyclopedia? You're absolutely correct, he is. I would love to bring F. Braun back at some point. I think he's going to be a valuable thing. And I'm thinking of doing something in the next couple of weeks that could be a lot of fun. And we're kind of planning on that right now. And it'll go to a lot of you guys that want to do it, and some of the instructors that might want to do it. But we've got some guests coming up that gave me the idea. But we're working hard on all these different things at the moment. I got 1 week before my birthday. Thank you for the happy birthdays. I tend to not look at birthdays anymore because I've given up on them. I might want to go away for a couple of days with the family this year, just to get away from everything. But thank you for that. So in leaving you, this week is Memorial Day, where I hope you're going to be safe wherever you guys are. I know that those of you in Europe don't celebrate Memorial Day, but it is what it is. And so we're going to be going away possibly for that day. So I hope you stay safe there. I know a lot of the counties of states have opened up now, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully this virus will find a cure at some point, which I think is why it was actually created in the first place. But stay safe. The sword experiences that we will be doing will have a lot of protocols put in place from then on. It will mean wearing masks at certain sword experiences from time to time, depending on when we go back. It will mean washing your bokens down with, wiping them down with sanitary equipment. It will mean a lot of different things that we will have to impose on our participants, just to make sure that everybody keeps safe and we're not spreading anything that shouldn't be spread. So with that said, I'm going to say I'll see you soon at the next sword experience. Make sure you share the stuff that we've got, share this, the link to this, and I want to say thank you for supporting me, and all the support you guys give me on Patreon is very much appreciated. And I hope that we can bring you more stuff that is great at this particular time. Obviously, we launched Patreon at a very low price level, purely and simply because people are struggling at the moment, and we want to make sure that everybody gets the benefit of working out that they can do during the pandemic. And I hope you keep working out, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.